Peter, we've talked about swims that are 2 hours or less. Let's take a swim that is, say, 6 hours. What is the nutritional advice you give for this swim?
Well, for this swim, it's a very different story now. And again, if you're swimming for 6 hours, let's assume that you're a reasonably metabolically flexible person, which means you're fit, you fixed your nutrition outside of the water so that you're not someone who lives in a high insulin environment. You're someone who now can access fat stores while exercising. Now, at 6 hours of duration, you're obviously not exercising at the intensity that that person is exercising at for 2 hours. You're probably working at what we would call about 60% of VO2 peak or 60% of VO2 max. For me, that works out to being about 750 calories an hour is how much energy I'm burning at that level. So let's start doing the math on that, right? You just said 6 hours. So in 6 hours, I'm going to go through 4,500 calories. Well, that far exceeds my ability to store glycogen. So now the question becomes, how much of that do I need to draw on from carbohydrate sources for glucose to supply the glycolytic pathway versus how much can I use from my internal fat stores? Well, if I'm really metabolically flexible and efficient, I can probably get 50 to 60, maybe even 80% of that energy out of fat, which really means I'm now at a spot where I don't actually need to ingest a whole lot of glucose, which is effectively anytime we're eating a carbohydrate source, it's to give us glucose during that swim. The other thing to keep in mind, Mike, is our bodies can't really process that much glucose in the first place. So the reason a lot of people end up feeling really sick at about the 6 hour mark of a swim, and I've been on many swims where that happens, unfortunately, even amongst really good and experienced swimmers, is if you try to pound too much of this stuff down, your stomach starts to dump it too quickly. When it gets into your gut says, boy, this is a lot of stuff. I need to dilute it a little bit. It starts to bring in water from the cells, which does this bizarre thing. It actually dehydrates you because it's dehydrating, taking water out of your cells, and it tries to dilute the stuff in your stomach. You start to feel really sick. So as a general rule, I recommend that people ingest no more than probably 1 gram of carbohydrate per hour, per minute, so 60 grams per hour. And I would say that you want to strive for a carbohydrate that doesn't turn off your ability to burn fat, which means it's a carbohydrate that doesn't stimulate an insulin response.
Well, you just mentioned something. 60 grams of carbohydrate is not that much.
No, and I would say that's the maximum. That's only going to give you about 210 to 220 calories per hour. And if you recall, I said at a 6 hour swim, I'm at 60% of peak VO2. That's 750 calories per hour.
Well, so essentially what I'm taking from all of this information is most people feed too much.
Yeah, I believe that's probably the biggest crisis is probably too strong a word, but that's probably one of the biggest problems in endurance sports. When you start to talk about marathon swimmers, marathon runners, triathletes, ultra distance or ultra elite distance athletes, they tend to overfeed. And they're doing it because they're feeding on the wrong stuff, and it's shutting off their ability to access their fat stores. So they're actually thinking they need more energy than they do, and they've created a situation where that's actually true.
Because of the spiking insulin levels.
That's right.
Wow, that's really interesting stuff. Obviously, that's some, pardon the pun, food for thought.